March 1st, 2023, and this is a public town hall on gunshot detection technology hosted by the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. Tonight's event will be led by our two facilitators, Afrida and Teresa, who will guide us through the agenda and help maintain an environment where everyone can be heard. At this time, I will hand it to Teresa.
Thank you so much, Dory. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So today is March 1st, and it's at 6 p.m. As mentioned, my name is Teresa. I'll be one of the facilitators. I do want to mention, if we want to go to the next slide. I do want to mention that we do have Spanish and American Sign Language interpretation. So if you're a Spanish speaker, si hablas español y quieres interpretación, lo tenemos para ustedes. Thank you. And if we go to the next slide, please. So I just want to mention that this is a town hall, which is a public meeting. There's a video recording and a chat transcript of the event, and it'll become part of the public record. We ask that you use a chat function in the manner that is respectful of the people who worked hard to put this event on and of the community members giving testimony. If there are repeated violations of our community standards in the chat, we may not be able to leave it open. Next slide, please. So we'd like to take a moment and review our community standards. Number one, be respectful of other attendees, panelists, and event staff in your word choice and avoid harmful comments. This includes comments that are considered likely to disrupt, provoke, or attack others. Racist, sexist, homophobic, sexually explicit, abusive, or otherwise harmful. Hate speech, harassment, or doxing in any form. Respect town hall event staff and their responsibility to uphold these guidelines. Attendees who violate these standards may be removed. I will now introduce two PCCEP members, Tia and Ashley, who are co-chairs of the PCCEP Community Engagement Subcommittee. Tia and Ashley will be presenting the next slides. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Yep. My name is Ashley Schofield. I am a member of the PCCEP and co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee here on PCCEP. Thank you so much on behalf of the entire PCCEP. We are really excited to have this forum tonight, and we really thank you all for being engaged and coming tonight. We know it's a sacrifice to come and spend a couple hours during dinner time. We have a couple objectives tonight. The main one is to make sure that the community understood and knew what was going on with possible pilot of gunshot detection technology being placed in our community. So we have a couple panelists, and I have a colleague of mine who will explain that a little bit more. But we are excited to be able to create this platform to have a space for the community to be informed about this technology. I want to recognize a little bit here that that we can't we can't promise 100% trauma-free space, as we know that when it comes to the topic of policing in our community, specifically here in Portland, that there is trauma with that. PCCEP is, in fact, and my colleague Celeste will talk on this a little bit more, but PCCEP is here because of known force, excessive force by Portland Police Bureau on our community's most vulnerable members. So just recognizing that trauma, recognizing that's there. But to say that we as a community can together create a safe space tonight for us all to have the ability to have input, ask questions, raise any concerns if that is what they want to do. So together, let's create that space and let's be civil and have respectful discourse. We have some great facilitators who are going to help us lead that kind of conversation. Next slide, please. And then our other objective, of course, is to take this information and do something with it. So something that PCCEP is authorized to do is submit recommendations to the mayor, who is also the police commissioner, as well as the Portland Police Bureau chief. As part of this settlement, the city is required to respond to PCCEP's recommendation within 60 days. So there's a little power that we have there in order in regard to taking the input that we have tonight and sending it to the mayor's desk. Another place that we hope we can show up together in community is testifying at City Council. And we'll have some next steps on that after community public testimony, where we can further this conversation and make sure that the City Council hears us. And so PCCEP could do that as a whole, but then also we could ask the community to show up in that way as well. So with that, thank you so much again for being here, and I'll pass it over to my colleague, Tia. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. Oh, no, this is it. Thank you. My name is Tia Palafox, and I am a PCCEP member and a co-chair with Ashley on the Community Engagement Subcommittee. Tonight, we hope to get your input on the following questions. Is gunshot detection a good fit for our city? If not, why not? If so, how should it be implemented? And now I'll pass it back to our facilitators to get started and continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Afrida, and I'm one of your facilitators for this event. In addition to our PCCEP members, tonight we will be joined by the following panelists. All of these panelists will be available for question, and a few of them will introduce themselves shortly. Next slide, please. Now let's take a look ahead of our schedule tonight. We will begin with opening comments from PCCEP, which will include background information about the gunshot detection technology and the city's timeline. We will then hear from 2 community organizations as well as the mayor's office. All of the remaining time will be devoted to public testimony. We will take a 10-minute break halfway through, and we'll provide more detail about public testimony when we get to that section. I will now hand it to Celeste, co-chair of the full PCCEP committee, to provide a few opening comments about PCCEP and gunshot detection.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. We are so impressed and appreciative of the turnout. My name is Celeste Carey. I am one of the co-chairs for PCCEP, Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. And very briefly, here's who we are. And read along with me. PCCEP is a group of 13 community members. We are an independent group from the city and the Portland Police Bureau. Our work includes independently assessing progress in the Department of Justice settlement agreement and gathering input on Portland Police Bureau policies and practices. Next slide, please. There we go. PCCEP does work in these committees: settlement and policy, community engagement, and racial equity. This all happens in public meetings that you can attend. And now I want to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about gunshot detection technology. What is it? Very, very broadly speaking, it's acoustic and/or energy sensor system and a proprietary, that means secret sauce, so to speak, a undisclosed plan, algorithm intended to detect gunfire. Most of these systems are installed outdoors, mounted on streetlights or other elevated structures, like telephone poles. There are an average of 20 to 25 sensors installed per square mile in any given community or neighborhood. When the sensors are triggered, dispatchers are notified of a latitude and longitude location. Some people call that geolocation. Now, here's some of the an overview of some of what the city's been up to and some other relevant events. In 2021, we had an incredibly and sad year for record homicide and gun violence events. In July of 2022, Mayor Wheeler's emergency declaration on gun violence was pronounced. July 2022 also, the FITCOG shot spotter recommendation. And what is the FITCOG, an acronym for, Dory, because it certainly just left my mind here.
The FITCOG stands for the Focused Intervention Team Community Oversight Group. I can put that in the chat.
Thank you very much. Okay, in September, following that, 2022, there was an OPB article which raised questions about shot spotters specifically, their conduct relative to the FITCOG recommendation. In November of the same year, the city appears poised to move forward with ShotSpotter as the pilot agency for the gunshot detection project. December 2022, just a few months ago, text between ShotSpotter and the Police Bureau released via records request. So having read this now, we'd like to move on to the next slide here. Oh, I believe that's it, isn't it?
This is the next slide, Celeste.
Sorry, it looks so similar. There we go. I didn't see the year check. Okay, I need to clean my glasses apparently. January 2023, just last month, the city changes its course. It decides that there's going to be a competitive bid process for other gunshot detection companies, okay? The same month, the city released the request for proposals, or RFPs, for gunshot detection technologies. 4 companies applied. And this past month, Portland City Auditor opens up an investigation into ShotSpotter for possibly violating city lobbying codes. Today, we're having a town hall opportunity for your input on gunshot detection technology, which brings us to be prepared for input from us to the city on this vote that will take place at some time in the future on either the company selected for the RFP process or possible other alternatives. And thank you for paying attention, for giving my gaps, and I turn it back over now to our facilitators.
Thank you so much, Celeste. We are also joined by 2 community organizations who will be sharing opening remarks. Next slide. First, we have Amanda Lamb, who currently serves as Law Enforcement Resource Counsel at the Oregon Justice Resource Center. Amanda spent 12 years working in government, primarily in performance auditing and research. Amanda's research focused on criminal justice practices, including the use of force in jails, racial disparities, and prosecutions, and statewide misdemeanor sentencing practices. Most recently, Amanda served as Portland's Chief Deputy City Auditor, which included working with and leading the police accountability functions. Throughout her career, Amanda's work has focused on building systems of transparency and accountability in government, identifying and addressing inequity, and addressing the root causes of systemic problems. I'll pass it over to Afrida to introduce next person.
Oh, sorry. I think Amanda is going to speak now.
Oh, okay. My apologies. You're correct.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you, Amanda.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm really happy to be here. I think, first of all, I want to thank PCCEP volunteers and the city staff that put on this community event. I think this is a really important conversation, and I appreciate all of your time and effort in bringing us together. And of course, I want to thank all of the community members who've joined us here today. I think this is going to be a great conversation, and I'm really glad we're having it very openly and very publicly. So I am here representing the Oregon Justice Resource Center. I'm a civil rights attorney for the Oregon Justice Resource Center, focused on law enforcement related issues. And I want to say right at the top of my kind of opening remarks that I want to acknowledge the gun violence problem that we currently have here in Portland. It is really distressing. We've had a couple of record-breaking numbers of shots fired and homicides here in Portland. And I want to acknowledge that the city and the Portland Police Bureau are trying to address the gun violence problem, and I want to thank them for taking this problem really seriously. That said, our position at Oregon Justice Resource Center, and based on the research that I've done for a report that we published a couple of weeks ago, is that ShotSpotter and gunshot detection technology generally is just simply the wrong solution for Portland's gun violence problem. We have two main buckets of concerns. The first is public policy concerns, and the second is related to civil rights issues. And I'm going to take each of those in turn. So first, we found that implementing ShotSpotter or another form of gunshot detection technology, we believe that would be bad public policy for the city of Portland. And the first reason for that is because when you look at the research on jurisdictions that have implemented ShotSpotter, what the researchers are finding is that there is no actual community safety benefit. What I mean by that is there's no increase in arrests, there's no increase in case closures, and there's no decrease in either gun violence or homicides. So these jurisdictions are implementing these gunshot detection technologies and not actually seeing any community safety benefit. No, they're not actually addressing the problem of gun violence. What those jurisdictions do see is a significant increase in police workloads because of these gunshot detection technologies. And I want to step back for just a moment and put that in the context of the city of Portland. We've been hearing from the Portland Police Bureau for years that they are understaffed, and the data actually bear that out. If you look at their response times for responding to calls for shots fired, in 2019, their average response time was about 7 minutes. So that means from the time they got to call till the time police officers arrived at the scene, it was on average about 7 minutes. In 2022, that increased to almost 25 minutes. That's a 200% increase in response time related to shots fired. And so what we're looking at here is if we as a jurisdiction implemented ShotSpotter, we're increasing the workload for an already overburdened police force. And if you look at what other jurisdictions have seen, some have seen increases in police workload by up to 400%. And so we think that based on the numbers here, based on the facts on the ground, and the reality that we have here in Portland, ShotSpotter or other gunshot detection technology is just simply not a solution to our gun violence problem. The second bucket of concerns that we have, though, is related to civil rights abuses that ShotSpotter and gunshot detection technology can create. The first is generally related to privacy. These are surveillance technologies. Some of them have audio recording, others are constantly listening. Oregon law provides pretty robust privacy protections for community members, and it's just not at all clear that these gunshot detection technologies actually don't run afoul of those laws. But beyond that kind of theoretical privacy concern, there are also real world countless examples of other jurisdictions using gunshot detection technology as a tool for police abuse. And one kind of area that we see is there have been instances of law enforcement using ShotSpotter specifically to falsify evidence that justifies either an unconstitutional arrest or an unconstitutional use of force. So there have been instances where the law enforcement agency has requested that ShotSpotter amend their report to change the location of the gunfire to justify the arrest of an individual that wasn't involved, or to change the number of shots fired. In one instance, an officer fired 4 shots at a gentleman's back as he was running. This man was innocent. He had not committed any crime. He was running because the officer never identified themselves as law enforcement. Law enforcement shot 4 times at this individual's back. ShotSpotter picked up those 4 shots. The law enforcement agency asked them to add a fish or encourage them to relook. And the ShotSpotter eventually added a 5th shot, which corroborated the officer's story that the individual had shot first, which simply was not true. So these are instances of law enforcement abusing ShotSpotter as a tool and using it for unconstitutional policing. What the other things that other jurisdictions have found is that officers will use the mere presence of gunshot detection technology as justification for stops and searches of individuals who otherwise they wouldn't have the reasonable suspicion necessary for a constitutional stop. But just the mere presence of ShotSpotter in a neighborhood has been used by law enforcement to justify these unconstitutional stops. So in other words, the presence of gunshot detection technology increases the risk of abuse by law enforcement. In my research, which I did quite a bit of research on these technologies, I found that the benefits of the gunshot detection technology, as I mentioned at the front half, are all theoretical. In theory, it might help address gun violence. In reality, it doesn't, but it does lead to all of these civil rights risks and civil rights abuses that have happened in other jurisdictions. So in sum, what I would say is that Portland does need long-term community-centered approaches to addressing our gun violence problem. But what we don't need is a police surveillance tool that can be used to further victimize the very communities that we're trying to help. Thanks again for having me here, and I look forward to the further conversation.
Thank you, Amanda. Next, we have Ajay Amechi. Ajay Amechi considers herself an activist, healer, and transformative justice activist. She has a diverse background in program management, operations, technology, design, and the healing arts. Having received a master's in philosophy with concentrations in the philosophy of the mind and critical race theory, she's passionate about truly understanding both society at large and the mechanisms of the brain in service of healing trauma and building power. She's currently a digital organizer at Freedom to Thrive, where she has worked for the past 4 years. Ajay. Yeah, we'll working on this.
Hello, thanks for having me. Amanda kind of touched on this, I think, really well, but in the face of a crisis, our first reactions often stem from a survival instinct. And are drawn from a highly emotional state of fear, right? So many people feel powerless right now to curb gun violence. And this lack of agency can cause some to seek out just about any solution or any action that makes them feel more in control. And so this drive to implement gunshot detection technology is clearly based on this emotional panic that makes people want to act right now. Now, while these are very valid emotional states, absolutely, given the loss of life, when it comes to making life or death decisions and policy decisions, emotionally reactive solutions are not only unhelpful, but they often exacerbate the issues at hand. And given PPB's history of racist policing and harm towards marginalized communities, we need to be careful about techno-solutionism as a quick fix for social problems. So let's put emotions aside and look at the facts. The facts are that over the past 13 years in Oregon, there's been a total of 386 incidents of police killings. And there have been, the fact is also that PPB has a history of protecting officers who are openly racist. For example, instead of holding openly white supremacist Captain Mark Kruger accountable, they erased his records of Nazi tributes. They gave him awards after his Nazi affiliations were public, and even demoted officers who filed complaints about these prejudices. The facts are that 1 in 10 homicides in Oregon are committed by law enforcement. The facts are that even as overall traffic stops in Portland decreased, racial disparities increased. The facts are that the increase of uses of deadly force by law enforcement in Oregon does not match the national number. And this is the 6th year in a row where there have been over 30 instances of force resulting in death. And yet we're supposed to ignore all that and trust that sending cops guns blazing into historically over-policed communities will somehow make us safer. I heard with my own ears at FitCog meetings the kind of disdain that FIT officers have for the communities most likely to have this technology implemented. One officer said, "Hazelwood, I don't even know where that is, but I know it's dangerous," to the dismay of the people that were there, many of which lived in Hazelwood, and expressed their shock that someone that's supposed to protect them is speaking in this way. So how can we trust that people that display this open hostility in a public forum to the communities that are tasked to protect will exercise care and restraint when they receive an alert? Of course, if you don't believe me, you can go watch the videos. Oh, wait, a lot of them were mysteriously deleted when people started paying attention. So here's some other facts. Houston spent $3.5 million on gunshot detection technology, and only 19% of those alerts resulted in officers finding evidence of gunfire, and half of the charges filed were misdemeanors. The facts are that in the July 2022 email, Durham employees with the police department said that these alerts could cause a significant backlog, especially considering the team is already behind. And at FitCog meetings, if you have gone, you would see that the FIT team at every single meeting complained about the very same kind of staffing issues. So, honestly, the fact that we're even debating this after all the people of Portland have been through, the violence against Portland residents who dared stand up for racial justice, the wanton brutality against people with disabilities, all of this well documented by the DOJ, and no accountability. And we're supposed to advocate for police surveillance as safety. I just ask people read the FitCog report, because I think there's an assumption that nobody will read it, because if you actually read it, you'll see some of the absurdities within it. For example, advocating an abundance mindset around police budgets. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I would expect to see in an episode of Portlandia, but not in a government report. And, we can't act like we're embodying progressive values and sit here and pitch a technology based on the racist idea of precision policing, which everybody knows is just the super predator myth 2.0. And we've already seen horrors of this ideology. We suffer under a widespread police culture where officers sees neighborhoods as war zones and community members as active combatants. We see how the police view themselves as the thin blue line between Black savagery and white picket fences. And we're supposed to see that all of this culture, this police culture that devalues the Black lives senselessly lost and sees Black and brown bodies as acceptable losses in the battle for safety. And, they tell us that they're not over policing fast enough. This gunshot detection technology is to fix that there's not enough racist police in Black and brown neighborhoods. But don't worry, gunshot detection technology will fix all of that. But I wonder if any of the FIT team or anyone that's advocating this actually spoke to somebody that lived under gunshot detection technology. The OIC, the Office of the Inspector General, OIG, I think, in Chicago, they did ask the communities living under ShotSpotter, and those communities said that it increased stop and frisks and overall tensions between police and community. And do we find that as an acceptable outcome for Portland? Did any of the FitCog or FIT team talk to Adam Toledo's mother, a 13-year-old that was killed as a result of a ShotSpotter alert? Or did they talk to, blanking on his name, the man who filed the lawsuit in Chicago, who was falsely in prison? He's a grandfather, and he's currently has a lawsuit against ShotSpotter and the city of Chicago at this very moment. Did they talk to him? And didn't they just authorize the purchase of $1.5 million surveillance plane, one that spews poisonous lead emissions, mostly over Black and brown neighborhoods? So it's not enough just to visually surveil Portlanders of color. We have to auditorily surveil them as well. And I know people are going to be like, what's the alternative? And I'm here to tell you that it's, I believe it's crime prevention through environmental design. And it's funny because the city has already passed a binding resolution about crime prevention through environmental design. So it seems disingenuous to act like these unproven technologies are the only thing that can keep us safe when the city has already tools in its toolbox that it's not currently utilizing to its full effect, or is actively defunding. Think of the lights that are all getting taken out. Think of the $1 million that was defunded from Friends of Trees. And the city knows that greenery and lights decrease crime, including gun violence. So why are they undoing that while asking us to put potentially millions into an unproven technology? So I say forget about which company to choose in this gunshot technology thing, and instead ask, which side of history do we want to be on? Do we want to be on the police side, who throughout history has always been on the wrong side of history, or do we want to be on the civil rights leader side? I mean, this is kind of the ridiculousness of this RFP charade. Can you imagine during the civil rights era doing a public engagement process about which type of fire hose we want to use against a civil rights leader? It's absurd. I mean, it's really time to stop letting the police turn their failures into more cash and more toys. Talk about failing upward. The worse they do their job, the more things they get. No productive entity should function like this. And, I'll just leave it at that before I really go into it. But thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's public commentary.
Thank you, Ajay. Next, we'll hear from Stephanie Howard, the Director of Public Safety. Stephanie will be representing the Mayor's office this evening. Stephanie?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, PCCEP, thank you so much for putting this together. I know how much work you have put into bringing together communities in this kind of sense, and to present the forum for these important discussions to happen. And so I'm really grateful that you've done this, and I'm really grateful to be here tonight to listen and to give what information I can about the process and what is the status of the process. So I won't rehash the history. That was done really well. That was covered in terms of how we got to this point. I will note, just ahead of anything else here, that I want to be sure that people do understand that this potential vendor, or whatever vendor may or may not be used, is not the only approach to gun violence prevention that the city is mentioning. Jay noted the CEPTED approach, and we are actually supporting that pretty widely. We've done really good work around the 82nd and Milton area. We've got a project ongoing right now in the Hazelwood area, and more on the way that are functioning on that crime prevention through environmental design. We've also invested historically through the Office of Violence Prevention to expand street level outreach, incredible messenger work to really try to prevent violence from happening. I think we all agree we would love to be in a place where we keep violence from happening at all. And so I want to be sure that people know that this is not a sole effort here. This is part of a much larger scheme that I think looks both upstream and invests heavily in more primary interventions to address the gun violence in our city. As you've heard, the FitCog made a recommendation to the mayor and to the chief of police that they believed that ShotSpotter would be a technology that would be of help in addressing gun violence. The chief, there were many discussions about that recommendation, and the chief ultimately recommended to the mayor that we pursue a pilot to see if it indeed was a useful tool, or a tool that would work or fit with Portland at all. And with that recommendation, the mayor directed me to work to bring together a proposal that would be brought to council. And I think that's important to note, because when we look at the timeline and the declaration of an emergency, there are a lot of powers that come along with that for a mayor. And I think there's an argument that had this not been contemplative of community input, there would have been authority for him to act to do that without it. But that is absolutely not what he wanted to do, not what anyone associated with this wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that the process that is developed is inclusive of community voice. So where we are now with this, the request for proposals has closed. There is an evaluation panel for those proposals that consists of members from the Smart City Group, who does privacy assessments for the city, member from the Office of Equity and Human Rights, members from the more technical bureaus, including BOEC and BTS. And we also have representation from each council office, as well as community representatives. And let me actually say council offices excluding the mayor. The mayor, we're not part of the scoring or evaluation committee for this. We're trying to facilitate that without being part of the actual scoring panel, which is why I'm able to talk about it tonight, because there are a lot of rules around the RFP process and what can be discussed and what can, what's needed in order to ensure a fair process. Part of the process that we developed for that RFP includes a town hall, and I believe we have a meeting tomorrow to schedule that date. I expect that it will likely be in about probably 2 weeks from tomorrow. We'll be sure to, widely notify everyone of that date and the accessibility and the all of the details, so that we can get hopefully a great turnout. Because at that town hall, what we will be doing is that the top 2 scoring vendors will be presenting their proposals to the community directly, and they will be able to speak to the community directly and answer to the community directly about their product and their proposal. So it is important to us to make sure that we are hearing from the community. That's been a big deciding factor in how this process is shaped up. It's critically important to, I think, all of us involved, both at the mayor's office and at the PPB, to hear, from the community at large as much as possible. And so I'm, again, just very grateful to be here. I'm, here to listen and to answer whatever questions I can, but I greatly appreciate everyone showing up today and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you to all of our panelists who provided opening comments to help frame our event tonight. We will now move into the public testimony portion of this event. Before we start, we'll go over the few ground rules as we enter this public testimony. And as I pass it off to Teresa, I do want to add or just remind that our panelists who spoke today, Amanda Lamb, Ajay Amechi, Stephanie Howard, and will be available to answer questions, as well as Captain Jack Jensen is also here available to answer questions. Teresa?
All right, thank you so much, Frida. I also want to thank all the speakers today. I think we're going to have a robust conversation from folks who want to speak today. And we do have some people here who are also going to be able to answer questions that you may have. But back to community standards, I just want to remind us that we want to be respectful of other attendees, panelists, event staff, and your word choice, and avoid harmful comments. This includes comments that are considered likely to disrupt, provoke, or attack others. Racist, sexist, homophobic, sexually explicit, abusive, or otherwise harmful. Hate speech, harassment, or doxing in any form. Respect town hall event staff and their responsibility to uphold these guidelines. Attendees who violate these standards may be removed. Thank you so much. The public testimony guidelines that I want to review is, so you'll be entering the queue by raising your hand on Zoom and wait for the facilitator to call on you. Each individual will have 2 minutes to make comment. Those using interpretation will be allotted 4 minutes. We may not have time to hear from everyone tonight. PCCEP wants to hear your input and will consider it on our ongoing work. Send written comments to our public comment form. You can also leave us a voicemail or send an email to PCCEP.info@portlandoregon.gov. All contact info can be found at http://portland.gov/PCCEP. Thank you. And here are some brief instructions on how to raise your hand. For those who are visual, I'm a very visual person as well. All right, can I turn this over to Afrida?
Yeah, so it looks like folks are lining up, and we'll go to the first panelist here. I just want to know if you do have a question for one of the panelists. We ask that you also keep your response to the time limit as well. So first, we're going to unmute Luna. Luna, I'll invite you to unmute yourself and enter your comment.
Hi, my name is Luna, and I live out in Southeast Portland. And my concern with this whole ShotSpotter is that all it's going to do is continuously make tensions rise between Portland Police Bureau. I myself have had an experience with them where I was falsely arrested. And it was just like, I don't want them to have more reason to come after people of color, minorities or whatever, because it's already high enough, like especially within Portland's racist bureau, like in my opinion. Like it's too high and that's not gonna do anything. All it's gonna do is aggravate us and give them more like of an ego trip where they're like, oh, da 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 da. I also probably like, I just know people are childish. There could be people who go around shooting around just to like make the shot spotters go off, like, or make like loud noises. And I also don't really feel too comfortable walking around in my city anymore if I have 25 listening devices per square mile. Like that's not gonna make me feel comfortable talking to my kid or talking to whoever about whatever instance. Like that's another tool for them to like spy on us. They already just got like a $25 million spy plane or something. We don't need that. Like I know that they're understaffed and Portland does have a problem when it comes to shootings, but this is not the answer. And I will move out of Portland if this is gonna be happening because this is crazy. Like it's unnecessary and we don't need more tensions between PPB and people of color such as myself and already like tense situation. And especially when like people of color are like the like smallest like majority of people here in Portland. Like
Luna.
Yes.
That's 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to wrap your final sentence, but we're going to go to the next person.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just don't think that it would be helpful. And all it's going to do is traumatize the folks that it happens to and make people feel uncomfortable and not want to go outside and do what they need to do.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, and just so folks know that you may be looking at the screen and see certain hands and then I call people that are not on the screen visually. There is a list that I'm going by who raised their hand in order. So the next person that I'll ask to go ahead and speak is Mel.
Hi, I'm Mel. Just want to put on public record that ShotSpotter does not stop or prevent gun violence. Even in Portland's community oversight group's own recommendation for the city to implement ShotSpotter technology, they argue that ShotSpotter does not prevent gun violence. It just helps investigate and respond to shootings. I would like to point out that this is even an unfounded claim. The only official reports of the efficacy of the program were commissioned by ShotSpotter, since they do not allow independent audits of the technology. And even that study found that everyday sounds like church bells and construction set off the technology. Cities where the technology has been used, like San Diego and Fall River, have claimed that ShotSpotter's claims of accuracy are way overstated. And many cities that have tried ShotSpotter are now revoking their contracts, including Buffalo, Dayton, Ohio, San Diego have called for a pause. So not only does it seem to not be effective, but it causes a lot of harm, which I'm going to briefly highlight. I know some people have mentioned privacy concerns, the microphones listening 24/7 in undisclosed locations, technology leading to racist stops, indiscriminate stops and searches of people in the area, and also that law enforcement can falsify data to make false arrests and use force. This has happened already in the cases of Danny Ortiz and Michael Williams. Would really like to see the city move away from private carceral surveillance technology and toward engaging communities with public resources to actually prevent gun violence. I was really disappointed to read through the 61-page recommendation, which is the that group's only recommendation. I haven't seen any recommendations on identifying or upending the roots of gun violence.
Your time is up. So if you want to finish and wrap your final thought.
All right, that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Next, we'll go to Trish.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for these presentations and the chat, the questions, and so on. I basically have two questions, perhaps three, to Captain Jensen. Firstly, FITCOG, which I understand is Focused Intervention Team Community Oversight Group. It's my understanding that that's focused on gun violence in Portland, but to do so through a community based approach, and I wanted to know how that actually works. I also understand that with respect to civil rights, potential violations and conversations, that tapes of conversations will not be maintained. And also the issue about racist stops following after ShotSpotter identification. It seems to me that instead of just random stops, what this seems to be is some effort on the part of the city and the police department to inject some actual evidence and facts into that process, rather than just, oh, I don't know, it's my opinion, I'll stop this person. Anyway, so I guess that's three questions. That's a lot. But again, I thank everyone. That's it.
All right, Trish, thank you for those questions. I got two of them. I didn't get the middle one, so I'm going to go with the two that I got. As far as how the FITCOG works, they're a community-based organization. They provide oversight to the focused intervention team. They do that primarily through meetings we have with them every other week. The first half of those meetings are open to the public, and I would encourage everyone here to go to those FITCOG meetings if you want to see how the process works. It essentially involves a back and forth conversation where we talk about what we've done, what we're planning on doing, and they provide feedback, ask questions, get more information, give us some guidance on what they would like to see. In terms of, I guess you're asking like how we would use gunshot detection technology if it were implemented. And that's what I'm here to get some information on. One of my primary tasks here is to listen to the community and talk about how, if we do engage in this pilot process, we should engage in the pilot process. What sort of safeguards or guardrails we should have in place to protect civil rights and implement this program. Should we implement it in a way that's consistent with community expectations? And I saw a question in the chat. Yes, the first half of FITCOG meetings are open to the public.
All right. Next, we'll go to Beatrix.
Yes, thank you, PCCEP, for this opportunity. My name is Beatrix Lee, a resident of Portland, here to express my concerns about the consideration of implementing ShotSpotter. I will say that we live in a highly surveilled and policed country, most in the world, arguably, with over $1 trillion dedicated to build a sci-fi 1984-like state. We must deeply reflect on what kind of city that we want to live in. I believe the use of this surveillance technology violates our Fourth Amendment rights, privacy, and I'm sure the city doesn't want to cash out on more settlements on police brutality. In Chicago, there is currently a lawsuit as ShotSpotter sent police and killed a 14-year-old Latino boy, Adam Toledo. As mentioned before, this tech is alarming as it would exacerbate racial disparities that already exist in police violence towards communities of color. The city must thoroughly review the data from trusted peer-reviewed sources before making a decision that would further harm community's view and experience with Portland police. There's no return on investment and arguably harmful return from this decision. We also don't talk enough about gun violence committed by police, and gun violence cannot be solved with more gun violence. ShotSpotter is ineffective, expensive, and does not increase public safety. Portland's tax dollars should be invested in communities to address the root causes of crime, housing, help people stay in their homes, healthcare, and good infrastructure, good education, and jobs, even at $1,000 checks to everyone. And as we've seen, creative solutions such as street lights, traffic barrels, as former city council member Hardesty successfully implemented and drove down gun violence in the Arletta neighborhood by 40%. To respond to the comment that was made about ShotSpotter being a community-based organization, I will say that it is not a nonprofit. It is a for-profit company, and they are making money off of gun violence, basically. And finally, my question, and I'm not sure if it can be answered here, but how will it be measurable by the city as we listen to community members, right? So if there are 95 out of 100 Portlanders that are against ShotSpotter, and the city council goes through and still votes yes, that is deeply concerning to me. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Beatrix. And Stephanie, do you want to respond to that question?
Can you hear me? Sorry. The question about the community group, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, the question that was at the end of what Beatrix's statement.
Yeah, no, I put it in the chat, but I think the statement was that the FitCog is a community organization, not ShotSpotter. Just wanted to make that clarification.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. And Amanda, I believe Trisha had a question, her third question. You want to respond to that question? Could you restate the question for folks and then respond to it?
I will do my very best to restate the question. The way I heard the question was whether or not ShotSpotter or gunshot detection technology could be used as a tool for law enforcement to target stops rather than kind of randomly stop somebody. And how I wanted to respond, please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but what I wanted to just briefly mention is the difference between a law enforcement response related to a gunshot alert versus a 911 call. When police get a 911 call, the dispatchers are able to ask the caller questions about the incident. You know, are there still people around? Is somebody injured? What kind of car were people driving? Can you give a description of anybody? And so that's giving the police more information to come into the scene. And if they have information about what an individual might look like or what a car might look like, then they might be able to, they would have reasonable suspicion to stop an individual who matches that description or a car that matches that description. With a ShotSpotter alert, all they have is an alert. All they have is a notification that something that ShotSpotter detected and determined was gunfire, which may or may not be gunfire, may just be church bells, but that they have an alert from ShotSpotter. So they're going into the scene essentially blind. And that's why it creates this opportunity for the police to then stop kind of random individuals that just happen to be in that area and have nothing to do with the actual gunfire incident. And there is a question of whether or not that actually reaches the constitutional requirement for making a constitutional stop. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the difference between a police response to a 911 call and a ShotSpotter alert. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. Ajay, I see your question. If you also want to respond to that question, I'm going to ask that we hold off on that and we go back to the hands. It looks like there might be an opportunity, Ajay, for you to respond to that question as well. Next, Devin.
Thank you. My name is Devin Peters. I wish to voice my opposition to any gunshot detection program, ShotSpotter, or otherwise in Portland. Even the most basic of due diligence and research finds overwhelming evidence that these programs and devices do not work. They have consistently been shown to throw false positives for cars driving by, slam doors, birds flapping their wings, and other very common sounds, all of which occur far more frequently than a gunshot. They are wastes of taxpayer money, police resources, and further the divide between police and communities by putting said communities at additional risk for confrontation with police officers. In addition, it is not difficult to understand these types of programs do not prevent or reduce gun violence. If a gun has already been shot, the event or crime has already occurred. These devices are no better than local community members calling the police, and humans are far more accurate, less costly, and less likely to waste police time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Karina.
Hi, good evening. I'm here with my friend Megan as well. And we are here in opposition of gunshot detection technology. I think that we've seen in cities like Chicago that these sensors are being placed in neighborhoods that are predominantly neighborhoods of color, which is leading to an inflation of gun statistics. So these sensors are being placed in neighborhoods of color because they are already high crime areas, but having sensors in these neighborhoods means that there are more alerts and more incidences, which is also just inflating these statistics, which is giving them more reasoning to put them in these neighborhoods. And so while I am personally against detection technology, if the city still decides to go through with it, much against like public opinion, will the city consider this during installation? Do they know which neighborhoods will have the first installations and the intention behind their decisions? And if no one can answer this question now, I just want it to be something that the city is keeping in mind. Thank you.
Does one of our panelists want to try to answer that? Yes. Okay, Stephanie.
Yes. So what we have intended to do with the RFP process and with the community input that we're receiving is to make that a discussion. The location of any kind of sensors, if the city does proceed with this, to make that a discussion with community input so that the communities that are present or that are, that could be impacted have a voice in what that would look like if it is implemented there. And so all that's to say there's not been a decision on where this would go.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Next, Mariana.
Good evening, members of PCCEP. Thank you for allowing me to testify on behalf of the ACLU of Oregon. My name is Mariana Garcia Medina. We are alarmed that the city of Portland is considering a contract with ShotSpotter and other gunshot detection systems in the name of public safety. Although companies build their gun detection technology as the answer to rampant gun violence, outside studies repeatedly raise concerns. Gunshot detection system pose a myriad of problems. Their effectiveness is questionable, they cost millions of taxpayer dollars, and they disproportionately endanger BIPOC communities. Artificial intelligence is notorious for perpetrating racism. The coders invariably write into the software. They have algorithm bias. When cities implement AI on such a mass scale, particularly to aid law enforcement, existing racial profile issues multiply. Other cities' records indicate that gunshot detection systems may exacerbate the problem of police misconduct that disproportionately impacts our BIPOC communities, low-income community neighborhoods. Studies demonstrate that stop and frisk and lethal force may increase due to the technology's frequent concentration in predominantly BIPOC areas, as occurred in the KLM of Adam Toledo. Evidence suggests that these systems fail to reduce gun violence, the very problem that it's trying to address. The city of Chicago's own analysis revealed that 90% of police dispatches initiated by gunshot detection software did not result in a case report being filed by their officers. The reality is that gunshot detection systems do not work and are a danger to community members who are already vulnerable to violence. The ACLU of Oregon strongly firms against the city of Portland implementing any such technologies in our communities, and instead would like to see the city of Portland working with the community to create community-centered solutions to gun violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Next, Benjamin.
Hello, thank you. Gunshot technology is not the solution we need. Gun violence is a very serious problem here in Portland, and I really appreciate the concern and the efforts to look for solutions by city councilors and the Portland police and community groups. I'm a member of the Oregon Justice Resource Center, along with Amanda Lamb, who presented today, and I have, with her, looked deeply into the implementation of ShotSpotter in other cities and come to the same conclusion that almost every commenter here has reached through their research, which is that ShotSpotter is it just doesn't measure up to the superficial appeal of a high-tech fix. It just doesn't deliver. It won't help Portland with gun violence. It gives too many false alarms that will waste police time. You've heard a lot about bad data and the bad stops. So I want to emphasize for a moment that even when the technology works, it doesn't give police the information they need. As Amanda Lamb explained, they go into the scene virtually blind without the information from a 911 call, and even more importantly, without the context of real engagement with the community. Instead, this leads to violent encounters and racist stops because police all they have to rely on is their own biases and assumptions about who to target and who to stop. It's an attractive technology to lawmakers because it seems like a quick fix. It relieves the fear of what's happening with gun violence by appearing to do something. And that's why too many cities have jumped on it. But city councilors who've done their homework, like the City Council of Seattle, which just rejected ShotSpotter in November, have realized that it's just a seductive high-tech fix that will not really help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. Next, Byron.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if I have a questions or statements, but they have two companies. The mayor has to figure out how to deal with this, and some of his judgment has been questioned on certain other things. And so I guess my concerns are, and forgive me, my name is Byron Vaughn. I'm a PCCEP member and chair of the Racial Equity Subcommittee. Once they have the two companies, they they move forward with the companies. How long is the pilot program? A year? And then if after the pilot program, will they move forward with it and keep it? And then I guess my question is, if we collect data that shows that it's not working, can we have it removed? And I don't know if that's a question or a statement, if somebody can answer that. And if they do keep it, is this, I'm sorry, and then if they do keep it, is this forever thing that they're going to keep it forever? Or not? I'm not too sure how the words to put that together, but that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. And it looks like Stephanie will be willing to answer some of your questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thanks, Byron. Yes, the pilot would be for 1 year. The purpose of that would be to assess, if it moves forward, the purpose would be to assess whether or not it did deliver any efficacy, and whether or not the city wanted to proceed forward with it in any other fashion. It would not be automatically renewed. So that would be, where a decision point would be made at the end of that. Was there one other question in that I'm missing? I'm sorry. I think I covered your questions, Byron, but if not, just let me know. I'm happy to answer.
I think the last piece was, would it last forever? Oh. Or would it just be permanent?
Right. No, not. And the other thing that's important here is that even after the evaluation process, this would still go forward for a vote of council. So that's, there would be an additional approval level there for this to proceed. But no, I don't think there would be any, based on what is, on the table right now. There's not an envisioned, a situation where this is a permanent fixture in Portland. This is, intended to just evaluate whether or not the technology is or is not a good fit for Portland.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Next, we'll go to Casey.
Hello there. My name is Casey Lewis. I am a member of the Police Accountability Commission. I'm also a member of the Mental Health Alliance. I am not here speaking on behalf of either of those groups today. I'm speaking only on my own behalf. I think that people who have gone before me have gotten into the sort of wastefulness and dangerousness of this program plenty. And I think people who are actually members of over-policed communities can really speak to that, and have the authority and experience to speak to that better than I can. I would really just like to voice my concern with the oversight of this program, both in recommending it, in implementing it, and then overseeing it if it is implemented. There's been a lot of talk about the FitCog being a community group, when in fact there has been some very troubling reporting about the FitCog being basically a rubber stamp for the police and the city, and being expressed by the police that the FitCog is expected to be advocating for them. There's an article by the Portland Mercury in which Dulio says that they want the FitCog to be advocating for the things that they think the Fit is doing right, which I think is very troubling. And there's the fact that half of the FitCog meeting is not in fact open to the public, expresses very little interest in transparency on the part of the FitCog. I also believe that the current city council that would be voting on this, as we have seen by the city of Portland choosing to amend the charter to have district-based city council, the current city council is not representative of the communities that would actually be impacted by this technology. And if it is important for the city council to go forward with this process, I think that it should wait until a city council has been elected under the new charter that has members who are in fact representative of over-policed communities. Finally, I think ultimately this is another step in the troubling history of the city being more interested in looking like they are doing something than actually doing something. I think that ShotSpotter is dangerous, ineffective, and should not be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Next, Samal.
Hello, everybody. Greetings. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to see a lot of colleagues, including those on the Police Accountability Commission. I am also on the City of Portland's Police Accountability Commission, and I'm a community organizer focusing on civil rights issues, particularly with Muslim communities, African American, and immigrant refugee communities. A lot of these communities have overlaps and over policing, and a lot of my work has led me to trying to figure out how we can help them within that realm. That's what's brought me here today, is really understanding the systems of data or the systems that have been structurally built to monitor and police Muslims in this country. Since 9/11, huge apparatuses were built, one of which we were able to kind of partially disable in 2018 with the Joint Terrorism Task Force successfully. And that should be just a touch. There's a lot more work to do, but I have a testimony, and it starts with, in 2005, Glasgow, Scotland was named the murder capital of Europe. Homicide was an epidemic that was sweeping the region, and decades of punitive investments only saw the issues worsen, with 137 homicides that year alone. In 2019, I should say, in the year 2019. And so the change required a completely different and scientific look at the issues. The solution was a groundbreaking project set up to treat violence as a disease with a root cause to be cured. This became a template for the entirety of Europe, as Glasgow utilized an empathic approach, working with deprived communities and letting go of a punitive view of fighting crime, which saw the homicide rate had dropped by 59 by 2018. So in 2005, it was about 137, and then good amount of time spent on the system, but the payoff was 59 by 2018. Whether you look at the template laid out the world over or not, the ability to see the issues as a public health crisis will advance community safety in the lives of would-be victims and their potential perpetrators. The city has so much access around it: health, education, social service sectors, community nonprofits, religious groups that are already, yes.
Could you go ahead and just wrap your final thought? We're a bit over time.
Yes, I appreciate it. With so much resource that the city has, it's choosing to instead invest in millions of dollars in a system that is privatized and for profit. So that is the deception. Mayor Wheeler had declared a gun violence a public emergency. However, looking beyond to save lives and build a better Portland should be the goal. It's easy for the city to manufacture feedback and consent that they need to get what they want to further invest in punitive structures, as our colleagues have said today. That's the power of a political position, but it requires adherence to science, data, and critical call as a public health crisis to begin engaging in solutions and root causes. Thank you. I apologize for going over.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Eddie.
Hello, I am a street medic for over 4 decades here in Portland, tending to people who have been victims of violent crimes committed by the Portland police. And I'm a friend and support for too many dozens of local people whose law-abiding, unarmed, nonviolent loved ones were killed by cops. 1, ban ShotSpotter and any change name of that entity for at least 10 years due to its corruption, ethical violations, anti-democracy, fraud, dishonesty, and ineffectiveness, and harm to communities. 2, do not pay for any version of a gunshot detection technology, since A, it has never been proven beneficial for public safety and social justice, and B, it has consistently been proven harmful, corrupting, dangerous, ineffective, and not preventing or solving crimes or caring for crime victims. 3, do not reward police for extortion and racketeering, for negligence and not doing their jobs by giving them more money, and make sure that whatever resources we use, that we have those who are not police, who are not agents or contractors to police, who are overseeing it, who keep short control of the records and post it and make it accessible to the public. Next, first change the local policing to be the opposite of Portland Police Bureau's entire history and centuries of policing in America of inequality favoring white terrorists such as the KKK and the wealthy against indigenous, enslaved people, African Americans, immigrants, union activists, human rights activists, whistleblowers, and environmentalists. To pay for this and to instead, we don't want to pay for the resulting lawsuits that will happen. Spend the money instead of further robbing our city funds. Instead, spend it on what has been proven effective to prevent crime and to best assist crime victims in their healing and build safe communities. That is through holding landlords accountable to have affordable rent. We have more people-less housing, at least 41 units per houseless person in Portland. Build safe communities with our parks and recreation, mental health and physical health, having nonviolent services. And then when you do have a call for need, prioritize paramedics and social services coming to the need.
Eddie, can you wrap your final thought? It's time.
Right. Prioritizing crime prevention and crime victim assistance that has nothing to do with the existing policing that we do.
Thank you. So next, Jack.
Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm gonna add my voice to the stack of people who are in opposition to any sort of gunshot detection technology being implemented. I feel like everyone has provided a lot of really going to would add more to the pile of evidence against these technologies being effective in any way towards preventing gunshots or violent crimes in any manner. And also, I just wanted to emphasize further along the same lines that Amanda from the OJRC did, just how harmful this technology actually is. The example given of the individual who was fired at by police, and then later the police coordinated with the shot stopper technicians or analysts to doctor up the evidence to make it seem as though that they had done a justified thing in shooting that man in the back. And I just think that it seems overwhelmingly that this produces no benefit to us and introduces a lot of additional avenues for harm to occur in areas and for communities that are already experiencing disproportional harm by over-policing. All that said, better solutions. I think that solutions have been shown to work in other places, long and short term, economic and material investment in the communities where gun violence occurs that could look like changes to public spaces in collaboration with community leaders, creating investment into the job opportunities and job training of people who are living in those communities, greater access to mental health resources, greater access to violence interruption and prevention programs that are closely in collaboration with people who live in and are leaders within the communities that are being impacted. This fancy tech company trying to sell us something is not going to help us. Speaking to people who are close to the issues at hand will. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Next, Kat, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kat Mahoney. I am the acting executive director at Sisters of the Road, and I am an attorney in Portland. If you followed my Twitter, you know that I've been keeping track of ShotSpotter and some of these other tech that is under consideration. There's a lot of people have said the same thing over and over and have backed it up, and it's 100% viable. But there's a couple of other things I think that we need to know. For instance, ShotSpotter uses police contracts as a source of revenue. The company exerts influence over agencies, the local government, and lobbies for grants and other spending programs that could be reallocated towards other aspects of safety. ShotSpotter has spent approximately $800,000 since 2017 in lobbying efforts to Congress, federal agencies, and other areas supporting grants to expand this type of tech and position themselves as the top choice. As you know, right now, ShotSpotter is being investigated for lobbying here in Portland. As you may also know, Terry Green, who's one of the reps, has contacted several people, me being one of them, to try and change our minds. ShotSpotter tells police departments how to respond to requests from the media, what to say, how to answer, and how to market it to the public. The company has created a market for themselves and benefit only their business. The goal is not safety, it's profit. ShotSpotter says that it has a 90% accuracy rate, but this was created by the sales and marketing department, not based on an engineer's calculation. The MacArthur Justice Center released a study that showed police data where ShotSpotter was used rarely led to arrest. 88% ended up being dead ends. Cops showed up, but after that, nothing happened. Local governments do not have the know-how to vet technology to figure out if it's good or accurate or right, which leaves this tech of this caliber largely unaccountable. The contracts range for this type of tech seem to go from $65,000 to $1.1 million a year for every square mile of service. That's our tax-paying money. Wouldn't we want to spend it in schools instead? This tech is almost exclusively placed in Black and Latino communities, and this would be true no matter if it was Eagle, Flock, 2020, or ShotSpotter. You know what else can detect the sound of a gunshot? Ears. And it has been said before, ShotSpotter was the tech in operation that caught the sound of a gunshot in Chicago. The cops showed up. They were on high alert. They saw a boy running away. That boy was Adam Toledo. He was unarmed, and the police killed him. According to the Chicago Police Department, there were 838 milliseconds between the cops saying, "Show me your hands," and firing that one bullet that killed that poor kid. And to bring it home, if you think about how Portland police have shown up here, let's talk about Normandale for a second. They got a call that there was gunfire. They showed up. I had ACLU legal observers there. You know what they saw? They saw cops roll up in their cars with rifles pointing out the window. They didn't know what or who they were doing. Some of the cars drove away, and when they showed up, they shoved medics away who were actually treating people who had been shot. Is that how we want the police to enter an area after ShotSpotter has told them, hey, something's going on here? No. Invest in community-based solutions, not this. Tech surveillance is not safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Next, Jake, please.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I want to start by appreciating PCCEP and their continuing volunteering and leadership. And it should be noted that this is the first community feedback session on gunshot detection. The FitCog, who provided a recommendation, never had community sessions and did not engage any local organizations prior to their recommendation. The fact that this is happening now is valued, but a little bit late. And I also want to call out that we are being asked for feedback with little information from the city on the program. The city has skipped a step, not asking if our community wants a mass surveillance system at all. We also have been given very little information to provide feedback on. Perhaps that is by design, but there's no information on the cost. There's no information on the efficacy, the locations these will be located, the oversight, the guardrails, the data governance. Do they sell our data to other parties? One of the companies proposing does. Who will be deciding on the efficacy after the pilot? How will the community be engaged in deciding to continue it? What will happen to the data after it's collected? We've also heard a lot about ShotSpotter tonight. They did get a large boost from their buddies in the Portland Police Bureau and FitCog, but the city has provided little information about the other companies, Eagle, 2020, and Flock. Some of those companies utilize AI algorithms, facial recognition technology that has been banned in Portland, video cameras, Stingray devices, and more. And many of them are untested, having no other city contracts, and have been shown to have adverse impacts. Why are we being asked for feedback here with such little information about the programs being proposed? The FIT team itself, the group administering the program, is led by an officer who's been found to collude with ShotSpotter with no accountability from the city. The same for FitCog, who was shown to collude with them and is now under investigation. Another FIT leader shot an innocent man who had wrestled a gun away from another one. The data we have on these systems is that they increase likelihood of racial profiling, as Jay Amici talked about from the OIG report in Chicago. But here we are again being asked to swallow another resource the cops, as Jay called out, have failed time and time again. And as a community, we're asking for no surveillance at all, not a slightly easier one to swallow. If Mayor Wheeler or the police listen to us, that is to be decided. And in closing, our own Senator, Ron Wyden, has said, while there continues to be a national debate on policing in America, it's become increasingly clear that algorithms and technologies used during investigations, like ShotSpotter, further racial bias and increase the potential for sending innocent people to prison. Why is our city proposing tech that puts the city at risk, counter to countless of the leaders who are here tonight and electeds like Ron Wyden? I ask that we vote and recommend no surveillance at all, and appreciate all of your time.
Thank you, Jake. Next, Yumi.
Frida, if I can interject here for a few seconds.
Yeah.
We have a request from the interpreters. If our folks who are speaking and giving testimony, if you can slow down a bit so that our interpreters can catch up with your comments and can interpret the information to folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa. There we go.
Thanks, Frida. My name is Yume Delgado. I serve on the City Citizen Review Committee, and although I'm not here in a official capacity, I do have some insight as to the work of FIT and this topic. So I will not try and state my reservations about ShotSpotter or similar technologies. I think everyone here has done a much more articulate job of that than I can, and I thank them for their testimony. I do want to echo what Casey said some time ago about the danger of grasping at technologies because we are desperate to solve the problem of gun violence in the city. As a CRC member, one of our obligations is that we go on ride-alongs. I had the opportunity to do so with FIT last year. And one of the things that I found most chilling about our interactions or experiences is how concerned some of the officers are about staffing. The fact that many people are resigning, many people are leaving, we are not replacing those officers. That's putting further taxation both on precincts and on FIT. FIT is not a 24/7 operation, right? So if we're going to put them out in the field with this unproven technology, how are we going to pay for that? How are we going to staff it? Is it going to be just FIT officers that are responding to that? If so, is it just going to be while FIT is active and on the streets? Or are we going to expect precinct officers to shoulder that burden? My concern about this sort of technology is that we will further degrade response times for the Bureau and make public safety worse, not better by embracing this. So I'm curious, I would love to hear from Stephanie or from Captain Jensen if a game plan has been put in place for that sort of staffing need. This is not saying that I think that this is a good technology or I support it. Just saying if we do go down this road, I'm not sure that we've thought about how we're going to actually staff it. Thank you.
Stephanie or Officer Jensen, yeah. All right. Stephanie.
Thank you. I'm going to answer Yume's question as best I can, but I'm also going to answer Jake's question if that's all right, because I was working on a response in the chat, but I think a couple of things, and I'll go in reverse order there to speak to Jake's question. The town hall that is part of the RFP process is intended for the community to engage directly with potential vendors, for them to present their technology to the community and have the community's questions answered by them, and for the community to learn more about the technology and continue to provide feedback to the city based on what they've learned. So I want to be clear that no decisions have been made. This is a great opportunity for community outreach. It's one of several. And I think I mentioned in the chat before, in addition to the town hall, that we're working on a survey that Portland State will develop and analyze So this is, not the only opportunity for us to receive feedback, because we, like, many of the people here, need to learn more about the technology before any decisions are made as well. And so that's the intention here. Yumi, with regard to your question about staffing, again, no decisions have been made, but I do want to note that the pilot, the RFP has called for no more than 4 square miles of coverage in the city for that 12-month period. And so I think response by police is something that we will want community input on, but it will also be very limited in the geographic location for where that would be placed. And I think that would also inform how the police crafts a response if this pilot proceeds and is passed by council. And Captain Jensen, feel free to jump in and add to anything if I haven't said it enough or if I've misstated anything.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I mean, Yumi's right. Response times and staffing is a real concern. I pulled up the open data from our website, and for this year, we're in the 16 to 17 minute response time on average for high priority calls. That's really not acceptable. We should be down closer to the 7 minutes or even less that we were in 2019. And so that's something that we're going to be working on. I've heard that from more than one person here, that staffing and response times are a concern. And if we end up going forward with this pilot, then one of my jobs is going to be working with Stephanie and getting community input to figure out how to manage these alerts in a way that doesn't further degrade call response times.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie and Officer Jensen. Lisa?
Hi, my name is Lisa Wright, and I'm a resident of Portland. And first, I want to thank Amanda and Ajay and for their opening statements, and Kat and Beatrix and some of the other folks here who have really done long-term work on this issue. And I want to echo Casey, who said that gun detection technology is dangerous, ineffective, and should not be implemented. We can't tech our way out of this problem of gun violence, and I'm frankly concerned about the things that continue to come out about not just ShotSpotter, but some of the other companies that are bidding for this RFP. And I think Jake pointed out that some of the tech may even be contradictory to our city ordinances around privacy and facial recognition. Stephanie, I think it's really important that you make sure that the city, that the mayor and PPD are paying attention to the data that is being presented about, that exists and is independent about the technology and how it is not effective, and the implementation problems we're going to have. We've seen the city continually, the elected leaders continually disinvest in parks, in lighting. I mean, just in the last 2 weeks, we have a new helicopter and we have masses of park lights going away, but the mayor says he wants everyone to be able to walk safely through the parks. Like, these things don't make sense. We're not investing in parks and recreation. We're not investing in jobs for youth. We're not investing in education. We need those things. We don't need technology that is, I know it's not hip to say, but frankly, un-American. And I appreciate that the ACLU is here speaking about that as well. So just to sum up, I hope that the community voices are heard and this feedback is taken seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Celeste?
Hi, everyone. I've been forwarded a couple of questions, so I'm going to try to hit them, and then I have a couple of statements. I've been in public safety for over 20 years. And one of the things that I will take a little bragging moment for is the park that was redesigned on Northeast Halsey, and I think about 102nd or 3rd. And I, while in crime prevention, studied a lot of CEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. I had the pleasure and the honor of working on quite a few projects throughout the city and areas of where I served. That park utilized a lot of techniques to help us be safe and to draw eyes upon the area, which includes lighting, which includes avoiding places that people were vulnerable. That's one of the techniques we can use to help reduce gun violence and violence in general, crime in general. So if you have time, do some investigation, learn a little bit more about crime prevention through environmental design. That is a helpful technique for even neighborhood associations and communities to learn so that they can implement this on their own properties. Now, the question I was asked was, and I guess I'll direct this to you, Stephanie, are we considering removing ShotSpotter from the process entirely? It seems that by keeping an organization that has already violated some of our statutes and has not demonstrated integrity, that we are sullying the whole RFP process. And I say that, and I want to add the disclaimer, I am not necessarily for surveillance at all, but I want to keep this a value neutral, take mine out of it. I know some people are asking, why are we even doing surveillance? Why are we not looking at other measures? But to be specific to the process, are we going to remove ShotSpotter from the process, keep what integrity we can with this process so that people actually can look to the city with a little bit more of trust and partnership? Thanks.
Thank you, Celeste. Stephanie?
Thanks, Celeste. We are evaluating that very seriously. There is a limit on what I can say because there is an open investigation, of course, but I based on what I can say, I would say we are taking that investigation incredibly seriously. We're figuring out what the interplay with the RFP process is and trying to just, maintain as much credibility in this process as we can. So I don't know what the decision will be. We're looking at it, but I want you to know we're taking that incredibly seriously.
Thank you.
Okay. Olive?
Hi, I'm Olive. I organize with the International League of People Struggles, and I just wanted to affirm, as many people have, that the people of Portland will not benefit from further police surveillance. The use of the funding that would go to gunshot detection technology would be better utilized, addressing the people's needs for housing, healthcare, and food access. These issues, after all, are the root causes of what gun detection technology supposedly would address. The economic crisis we find ourselves in has put people in truly desperate situations, and state assistance programs have dried up one after another. Any attempt to further surveil our communities should be rejected, and any measure taken by the city of Portland should be one that addresses the basic needs of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Olive. At this time, 7:41, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break.
Recording stopped.
The folks who are giving testimony, and I just want to remind us that we have about 2 minutes per person. And if you have an interpreter with you,
recording in progress.
It'll be 4 minutes. And you can use your time to ask panelists a question or follow up. Follow up may be limited to time constraints. But I do want to invite folks who haven't raised their hand to raise their hand to make a statement. I think we are here to listen to you. We're here to see you, and we're here to hear your perspective as a member of this community. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the next person. I have iPhone Sanga. Go ahead.
Uhuru means freedom. I just want to echo what everybody is saying, but what I want to bring forward here is that how many meetings have the community been in to state that we don't want any policing, but the bills keep passing, the measures keep passing, and the words that you use, we want the community feedback, but is it taken seriously? Because if it was taken seriously, none of the laws that y'all passed, none of the things that y'all want of over policing and policing period in the Black and brown community, we don't want. And you're trying to add more. So that should let everyone know that's here, that you don't care about the community, because the community has been speaking for over 20 years with solution after solution. Black community control, get the police out of our community, provide us with mental health solutions that you have already, provide us with food, shelter, provide us with the things that we need. But no one, even the mayor, even with the meeting today, earlier today, he cuts off the community because we're not saying what he wants us to say. All of these things you bring to the community and ask the community once again for your feedback, for us to lay on the line what's happened to us and what's being happened to us. And then you turn around and pass it. So tell us, how is it you care about our feedback when nothing happens when we give our feedback? The solution is already done. You have came up with the solution. You've already voted on it. Then you sit here and try to appease us and say, we're coming to the community. Again, a dime and a dollar too late, like you always do. You always say the same thing. Even the mayor says the same thing. We listen to the same thing. You listen to us over and over again, pleading for our safety. And this is what you provide. So tell me, how do you want the community to react to you not caring about what we say?
Thank you so much, Ifonsenga. Appreciate your comments. Let's go to the next person. It is Mike.
Oh, can you?
There you go. Can I get some tech support for Mike? For some reason, my button wasn't allowing to unmute him.
I think I'm unmuted now. I'm not sure how
perfect.
far.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Mike Sargitakis. I'm a lawyer, and until recently, for the last 5 years, I've been a small business owner in downtown Portland. I'll be brief. There's been a tremendous amount of insightful testimony about problems related to surveillance, civil rights, and police misconduct already causing great harm to this community. First, as Jake from PPB noted, the PPB already has abysmal response times and rates when it receives real specific information from a human being with real facts about situations in progress. What makes the city believe that suddenly PPB will have capacity to respond to unspecified reports of unconfirmed loud noises? It's absurd on its face. Couple that with the efficacy stats cited by Ms. Mahoney, and it's hard to understand how this expensive and statistically useless program is seriously being considered. PPB's budget has steadily increased for decades and currently is at its largest ever. If we're to believe that crime is on the rise too, one might draw the conclusion from this correlation that yet more money for this police department is actually making things worse. Shouts out to Commissioner Gonzalez, who campaigned on using data to drive policy decisions. I'm sure he'll agree with me on that. As Olive pointed out, the money spent on this ineffective technology could be put towards any number of actually proven effective programs that address root causes of gun violence. Finally, I'm not going to pretend like the city doesn't have problems. Unfortunately, these problems are not solved by sending a guy with a gun, a victim complex, and limited information into an already tense scene or a false positive. Gunshot detection technology is a distraction at best, and yet another source of cover for civil rights violations in a most likely scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate your comments. Next, we're going to go to Ashley.
Yes,
go ahead, Ashley.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to plug in here as a community member. You know, I'm a mother first. I am a community member. I volunteer in many different capacities. And more importantly, you know, I want to show up here as a community member that wants to echo what we've all said in different ways in our own different perspectives and testimonies, that policing is not public safety. I do not believe that. I do not teach my son that. I was talking to my son the other day about why people steal from cars, because while I have compassion, I'm not stupid, and we take things out of our cars when we're anywhere in the city. And he asked me, well, why do we have to do that? He's 6.5. And, you know, I explained to him that people do desperate things when they're desperate. And it's not an excuse for violence. It's not an excuse for theft. It's not an excuse for hurting people. But I wanted him to understand that there's not this correlation between bad and poor or desperation, that, you know, we have to. So I just want, you know, I wanted to tell that story because I want, you know, that's how my husband and I raised our son, and how to understand what public safety is, that using, you know, these tactics to over police our community, we know is not working. And so I just want to really thank everybody who showed up today and talked about what we actually need versus this technology, which is an investment and alternatives to public safety. And I just think that's the message we need to drive through. We're going to need to go to council together again. We're going to have to show up in many different ways, not just tonight. And so I really feel like we're all on the same page about what we want, what we don't want. And I really do plan as a member to make sure we take this as far as we can. Quick question, follow-up question around the pilot program. You know, I just want to clarify, somebody can just clarify for us. There's the RFP that's looking through the bids, and then those 2 top bids will have a town hall, and then we'll go to city council for a final vote between those 2 bids, or will a bid have been selected before it gets to city council? If anybody can answer for that for me, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Let's have Stephanie answer that question. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, so there would be one final bidder, one proposal selected by the evaluation committee, and then there would be a proposal put together, again, you know, welcoming community input that would then go to council.
Thank you. Stephanie, while we have you on here, I'd like to go back to a couple questions that came up from both iPhone and let's see, and Sanga's question or comment about why there are repeated calls for public input and the city ignores them. So it sounds like a lot of our community members are feeling unseen and unheard, despite the fact that they're engaging and they don't see action from the side of the city. Can you respond to that, Stephanie?
I can to a degree. I can't speak for every time that there has been an issue that was important and community input was sought and people felt disregarded. I get that, but I'm here right now with my whole intention to hear and to really understand and to really, make sure that as I, receive the feedback that it is, that it is honored, that it is valued, that, all of these perspectives are considered in any policy recommendations that I make to my, to my boss. And I will absolutely say that I'm so sorry for how frustrating and how unfair I'm sure that, feels and is for many people. So I want to acknowledge that. I can't speak on behalf of City Council. And so, I think all I can say is that I am here with absolute sincerity to listen. I am here with absolute sincerity to, hear from everyone. And I appreciate it. And I'm really glad and selfishly a little bit proud of PCCEP for pulling, this together and for the amazing turnout. And, I wish I had a better answer, but that is the answer that I have tonight.
Thank you, Stephanie. I also just want to quickly acknowledge I might have called iPhone when it's Santa. So I just want to correct that and be respectful. If that's how I'm reading the chat, I definitely want to honor everybody's name and the way they want to present themselves here. Okay, so let's, do any of the other panelists want to respond to the comments and questions we were just discussing? Stephanie responded, but does anybody else want to? Any of the other panelists? Okay, I see no raised hand. Okay, let's go next to
Amanda raised their hand.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. Who was this? Amanda?
Okay. Amanda, hi.
Go ahead, Amanda. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I just want to echo the sentiment that you're hearing from the group. Stephanie, I thank you for trying to respond to that. I know that's it's hard to respond for all of the failure of government forever. But I just want to echo the sentiment that when the city asks the public for engagement, and these folks have come over 100 people have come here tonight and are spending 3 hours of their evening together. I'm tired. I'm sure everybody else is tired. And I just want to implore the city to make this a meaningful public engagement process, not just a check the box, we did it kind of process, but a really taking the feedback that you're hearing here, bringing it to City Council, bringing it to the RFP team, bringing it to the proposal, and really evaluating whether or not this technology is needed and wanted for the city, rather than just letting this train kind of continue to leave the station without that level of evaluation. So I just want to thank everybody again for being here, and I just want to echo the call to make this process meaningful for the public. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. We'll go next to Yumi. Yumi, you're up. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this short. I just wanted to acknowledge and echo Sanga's comments. I think we have a lot of these meetings. I've been to many of them. I know many of the people here have been to far more than I have. And I've met some very dedicated people at the city. Stephanie, I think you're one of them. And I've met some people in the Bureau who are very thoughtful about this as well. But I think I would underline that there's sometimes a disconnect between the people who do the hard work of coming to these meetings on behalf of the city, on behalf of the Bureau, on behalf of whoever, and the people that you report to. And I think that is sometimes evidenced by what we see happen in City Hall, where they come with good intentions and then they eventually leave. So I want to uplift those comments. I want to say that everyone has done an amazingly articulate job of raising concerns about gunshot detection technology tonight. And that's much more important than what I'm about to ask. But I also know that people at the city listen to numbers and staffing and whatnot. So I'm going to ask this question, this follow-up. I'm looking in the RFP. I see mention about the geographic definitions that are TBD. I'm going to ask a follow-up question to my concern about staffing. So FIT has the benefit of having a dedicated mission, but they are also not 24/7, right? I'm assuming that there's a decent likelihood this will go in East Precinct, which is, pretty historically critically staffed. So I guess my question would be, is this technology, is this pilot only going to be on while FIT's on duty? Is that going to be primarily a FIT job? Or is this going to be a thing that's pushed on to precinct officers and BOEC, which are both critically understaffed right now? We don't have the money, we don't have the staffing. I think that's my concern, in addition to everything else that has been said so articulately tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Yumi. Who would like to answer that question from our panelists? Okay, let me get. There you go. Go ahead.
All right.
Officer Jensen.
Thanks, Yumi. I don't know what the final answer is going to be, because we haven't engaged in the policy making and procedure making process around this system yet, because we haven't even decided to go forward with the pilot. I can tell you kind of what I will do if I'm tasked with building that system out. One of the things I'll do is I'll talk to the community, and that's part of this process tonight. Another thing I'll do is I will go out and talk to the precincts and get their input. I'll talk to the command here, my chief's office, Stephanie Howard, other folks in city government, get their input. I'll probably also go and look at what other cities that have similar systems are doing in terms of response, and take all that information and try and find a solution that's workable. And I agree with you that response times are definitely a concern. And so that will be uppermost in my mind in terms of, trying to build something out that doesn't degrade the response time to other calls for service.
Great, thank you. Stephanie, do you want to add?
I will just add that, to your point you made about the impact on other bureaus. That is specifically why I made sure that we have a representative from BOEC in this evaluation panel, so that we are sure that we have a perspective on how that can impact them, as well as our Bureau of Technology Services, and that all of those are parts of discussions as the evaluation of any proposals is being considered, and those discussions would extend also to the town hall and the ongoing outreach that we intend to do before any implementation could ever occur if this does go forward.
Thank you, Stephanie. Before we move on to the next speakers, I know that there's some folks who have made some comments on the chat, and we may not have addressed them. I would invite you to raise your hand and ask your question if we haven't answered it. I think it's important that we hear from you. Okay, next we have Barbara. There you go. Barbara, you're up.
Yeah, Barbara Boshinsky, Portland Cop Watch. Stephanie, did you say, it sounds like this pilot project might be a done deal. Is it possible we can just stop the whole thing? Can't hear you.
There you go. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So I would say this is not a done deal. This is all about being, we're receiving feedback, and, we're reviewing the proposals that have been submitted. So there will be additional opportunity for engagement, for feedback based on the presentations of the top 2 scoring proposers. They will interact directly with communities so that they can answer questions, about their own technology and about all of the concerns that have been raised. So no, this is not a done deal. This is all a process of, evaluation and, outreach and development if a proposal is to move forward for a pilot.
Thank you, Stephanie. So Barbara, just to kind of reiterate, there's no decisions that have been made. This is why we're having this town hall, to hear from everybody's perspective. So you being here is allowing from folks from the city to understand and learn from you on what you want to happen next. Thank you. Okay, next we have iPhone Sanga. My apologies, I think I called you something else. Go ahead.
Okay, Stephanie, you keep saying the same exact thing, that this is not a done deal. But in the past, we've seen that this go on and on and on, and it becomes a done deal. Everybody wants to stop this from even going further, not to continue to go to a committee that's not the community one. And then you're constantly telling us that the same companies are going to tell us about the technology, like they can change our minds when we don't want the technology in the first place. So how is it not a done deal when we know that this is just a formality, that is already a meeting planned, and we still can come to it and still express what we need to express? But we all know while we sit here that it is a done deal when y'all even bring it to a table, because we're the last people that y'all listen to. So you can check off that box and say, we heard from the community. But the community is the people who need to be making the decisions, not coming to us and then saying we're taking it to a higher power to make the decision. That's not how that works. We're the community. You're sitting here telling us that you care when we know the mayor doesn't care. He specifically does everything he can not to give our Black and brown community what they need. He makes Twitters about it. He brags about it. He brags about hanging up on people when they want Black community control. They want land back. They want the resources that they're finna spend, what, $199 million can go to the community, but yet you find reasons to repackage this disgusting display of monitoring us and keeping control over us. And then you say you're doing it for our benefit when the mayor is the what? Police commissioner, and he's the chief. So he's making money hand over hand. So how are you sitting here telling us the same thing and say, trust us, no decisions have been made, and it's happened over and over and over and over and over and over again? Thank you.
Thank you, Sanga. Stephanie, did you want to address her comments?
Yeah, and I can't answer for everything that has been done and for, responses that have fallen short. I can't, all I can do, and I don't ask you to trust me tonight, but all I can do is to say that I am here listening, that I am here, with the full intent to hear, with the full intent to, try to recommend a decision that is best based on community feedback. And I can't ask you to trust me on that. I get that. I understand why people don't, and I can't ask that, but I think I don't know how else to respond other than to say that my sincere effort is here tonight to listen and to learn and to make this process meaningful and to value the input that we are receiving. And I will do everything that I can to raise those voices. And that's by all communities. So there's not a good answer that I could give. Unfortunately, I wish I could. But that is why I am here. It is not to check a box. I'm here truly to listen and to hear and to, understand and appreciate and be able to, inform any decisions that are made.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next, we have Aji. And my apologies if I pronounce your name incorrect.
Yeah, I quickly wanted to highlight or think about a question that was asked earlier about the idea of gunshot detection technology reducing individual cases of bias by police, like by reducing those interactions. And so one of the things in the FITCOG recommendation, this is a quote, on implementation, FITCOG believes it is imperative that ShotSpotter technology sensors are placed equitably throughout all of Portland, representing high risk areas for gun violence. Placement should be determined by data. In my opinion, the idea of equitably implementing police surveillance is ludicrous and borders on Orwellian doublespeak. Areas of Portland representing high risk for gun violence are also areas that are traditionally under-resourced in terms of the social determinants of health. And an equitable response to this would be to spend funds reducing the structural causes of gun violence, not spending hundreds of thousands or even millions on a system that primes police to see those underserved people as armed assailants. Because at the end of the day, ShotSpotter relies on the data you feed it. If you feed it racist data, you have racist impact. Like there is this idea that you can imagine that these gunshot detection technologies magically clean the system and gets rid of this individual bias, but it's actually the very opposite of that, because the problem lies within the data fed into the algorithm. And we know that the history of PPB is racist, and we know that they had racist police, that racism is in those police reports. And that police report data is what feeds these gunshot detection systems. So, in some ways, the city has acknowledged the racist harm that's happened to Black people in this community. So if you do acknowledge the racist history and the impact that policing has had on the Black community in Portland, then you also acknowledge that history is embedded into the data, into the police reports. And then once those police reports get fed into the system, it is actually compounding the bias, not reducing it. And we also know that a Black person is 5 times more likely to be stopped and twice as likely to be arrested. And that those patterns of behavior of profiling and overstopping and stopping and frisk lead to these skewed results. And the arrest data based on those disparities ends up encoding patterns of racist policing behavior into those systems, into those algorithms. So I just want that to be really, really clear that you cannot clean racist data by removing the racist. That's not how that works. The police reports are the racism encoded into the system. And I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here today. Next, we have Celeste.
Really briefly, I heard what Sangha said. I do want to say this though. PCCEP is here not as a function of the city. Our committee may exist through the city, but we exist by virtue of the Department of Justice settlement agreement against the city of Portland with respect to the police treatment of people with mental health challenges and folks of color. So we wanted to have this forum to show how the public felt about this, to elevate your voices. Okay, so we're not trying to rubber stamp or do anything like you have experienced in other meetings. Now, to say that, I will elevate your voices and ask a question directly. So here it is, and I'm sorry, Stephanie, because I'm about to put you in the hot seat. So warning, put on the extra layer of asbestos. Here the thing is, we don't want gunshot technology, is what the public is saying. Will council abort this process? It's abundantly apparent that people do not want this. There is evidence that there are other much more effective measures, whether it be healthcare or lighting or job training or whatever. We are saying that we can't keep city park lights on, but we're very happy to spend money on this project, which has no record of efficacy. So the question is, will council just abort this? What is the point of saying that you will have further input opportunities when we've already indicated we don't want the technology? So a further opportunity for input is actually, according to everything you've heard, an insult and a total disregard of community input. I know this is putting you on the seat, but unfortunately, that is the elephant in the room. Will the city council abort this project? Yes or no?
Thank you, Celeste. So we'll let Stephanie respond to that.
I wish I could give you a yes or no. I don't represent the city council. I don't make recommendations to the city.
Okay, I understand that. So what have they told you? Because I really feel for you. I have been an employee for the city and I've had to go to meetings like this and speak. Have they sent you out so vulnerable with no indication of how our input would be received?
No, I think that the input is absolutely critically valued, particularly in this situation.
So how are they going to demonstrate that this is valuable?
I need to report back to them about exactly this. I mean, that's exactly what that looks like. And so
in other words, you may be our sacrificial lamb, unfortunately. I hear you trying to be vulnerable and honest, but the feedback I'm getting from people behind the lines is that the question is not being answered. And I know I am putting you on the spot, and I appreciate your vulnerability and you're being straightforward. But I'll ask the question a different way. So you are not empowered to say by council that if we hear that the public doesn't want this, we are going to abort the project.
I am not in the position to make that statement on behalf of council. No, I am absolutely in the position to report back to council, report to my boss, report to all my colleagues in other council offices, and to continue this discussion and to have, I've got a meeting with colleagues tomorrow morning to discuss this. So I can't speak for everybody. That's just the reality.
Well, that's understood. And I do hope council is listening to our comments and does not kill the messenger, because we know you are going to be the bearer of our frustration, our fear, our angst, our anger when you come back to them. But I'm going to ask you for something. I'm prefacing, giving you this intro so that you can get yourself prepared. I want you to please tell them that we do not want it with the same amount of passion that you are hearing expressed today from people. That is critical. That is just as critical as the fact that nobody wants it. City council needs to hear, the mayor needs to hear that this is not a viable solution, as evidenced by what everybody has said. And even people who want crime reduction, who want public safety, who are not soft on crime, they recognize that this is not the answer. That's like saying, I have a toothache, therefore I am going to take a mallet to my tooth and knock that out. No, it's not effective. So please, at least give us your word that you will convey the depth of emotion and passion and the resounding no that we are telling you. And for everybody, again, this PCCEP town hall is not a function of the city. We are not playing into that dynamic of, oh, we really want to hear what you have to say, but that's as far as it goes. That is not the dynamic you are experiencing here. This is us sincerely using every tool we have to elevate your voices to the powers that be. Now we have to figure out how to leverage that with the powers that be, because Stephanie is our messenger. She's a two-way messenger. If we do not get the results we want, we have to figure out what is the next step, peaceably but effectively. And I'm going to task my PCCEP colleagues with figuring out how we work and accomplish our part in that next step. Thank you,
Celeste.
Thank you.
Appreciate your passion here. Stephanie, any last responses to Celeste?
Yeah, I will give you my word that I will convey the passion and the emotion and the seriousness of everything that I have heard today with absolute, factual, I've got a very long chat here that I haven't been able to pay attention to. That's all part of a record. I've got a meeting here, but you have my word. I will convey everything that I have learned tonight in as emotional a way as I have received it.
Thank you so much. And Stephanie, I think everybody acknowledges the position you're in, and but very grateful that you'll be communicating back to folks about the passion of this entire group, and it's pretty consistent. Thank you. Okay, next in line is Julie. Go ahead, Julie.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not going to go into all the reasons ShotSpotter is problematic. I feel like they've been covered comprehensively. I am against it being used. And what I want to ask is kind of some questions about how we got here. Kind of in relation, I said garbage in, garbage out for software in relation to what Jay said. And I wonder the same about this. Like, how did it take this long to realize that like all of this was coming from a spot where there was unethical lobbying? Like Stephanie was in a ton of those meetings starting in like July. I sat in FitCog meetings for a long time. A lot of the people in this meeting came there and repeatedly, despite the FitCog not wanting to have community hearings there, saying a lot of the things we're hearing in this meeting in like July of last year, August of last year, September, most of the summer I sat through them and then stopped attending because they really removed all ability to participate as a community member. So like the Smart Cities group gave negative feedback about some of these things. There's a lot of legal concerns. So I guess my questions are like, how did this get to be the point where it's brought to council and can't be adjusted with that kind of community feedback for months and months with this concern about lobbying? And then like, have we looked at the legal issues here at this point? Like, has there been significant legal review? Is this even a legal thing for us to move forward with? So I guess those are my two questions.
Thank you, Julie. I'll unmute Stephanie if she wants to respond, and we'll also technical difficulties. There we go.
There we go. I mean, I guess how did we get this far? I understand there has been a lot of feedback at FitCog meetings, and I was there. Like you said, I've heard a lot of it, and I've listened to a lot of it, and I've taken that feedback and tried to internalize that. But the other fact is that we do have a group of community members who made a recommendation, and however people may disagree with different perspectives on this issue, I am in a position where I am trying to balance as many interests as I can in as fair a way as I can as I learn more about this and try to create a process that is inclusive and try to create policy and presentations for decision makers on how to proceed, because this was this began as a community recommendation. So that's, first of all, nothing moves terribly fast in city government, so there's delay just on default there. But again, trying to be mindful and build into this process exactly what we're having tonight, which is dialogue beyond just one community group, because any one community group, right? Trying to build a diverse pathway for people to provide feedback, and trying to expand the kinds of feedback so that we are, making it possible for as many people and as many perspectives to be shared on this, because we are governing a whole city here, and there are differing perspectives on lots and lots of important issues. So, again, tonight has been a very helpful and important dialogue that I think I've been, glad to have, and I'm glad to hear all of these perspectives. But I don't think any one space is the space that captures everyone's feelings about everything all the time. And so I think that's part of what I'm trying to do here, is to build out as many ways to provide opportunity for feedback at every step that we can as these decisions are considered.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate you being here today, Julie. We're gonna go ahead and go to Jake. Jake, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. First I want to echo Julie's questions and, how did we get to now? And then I think with that point, in the OPB reporting and the records that have been released, it's clear that Portland Police Bureau members and FitCog members were working actively with ShotSpotter staffers. And for Portland Police Bureau, looking at their directives, public records laws, and other sort of ethical guidelines, those are all violations, and there is an investigation. So I have a question for Stephanie and for, is it Lieutenant or Captain Jensen, that has there been an investigation into the Portland Police Bureau officer who was found to be incorrectly or illegally communicating with ShotSpotter staff? And if not, why? And then if that report from the auditor's office comes back finding that they did illegally lobby, what accountability will be in place for Portland Police Bureau and for FitCog, who participated in that as well?
We're not going to be able to comment on the investigation. That needs to be completed by the auditor. I've said it before, I will say it again. We're cooperating completely with that to determine, exactly what has occurred, and I can't say more than that.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm assuming Officer Jensen doesn't have a comment on this as well.
No, other than just saying, Jake, I'll go with Jake, just like you. I'm happy with that. I don't need a lieutenant or captain or anything in front of my name. But yeah, there's an investigation going on that we can't talk about it. Sorry.
All right. Thank you so much, Jake, for being here today. Next, we'll go to Casey. Go ahead, Casey.
Certainly. I just wanted to follow up on what Celeste was saying and acknowledge sort of what a difficult and unfair situation Stephanie has been put in today. Sort of being, again, put out here as kind of the city's sacrificial lamb to hear these things. I've worked for elected officials before. If they wanted to hear this, they would have shown up and heard it. They would have looked us in the eyes and at least heard what we have to say, if not responded to us. But the mayor is not present today. No member of city council is present today. Chief Lavelle recently came out in favor of the ShotSpotter technology. He is not present today. None of them thought that this group was important enough for them actually to talk to us in person. And again, to actually look us in the eyes and hear our feedback and incorporate it into the decisions that ultimately are going to be up to them, or not going to be up to Stephanie. And again, that's one of the reasons why it's so unfair that she has to be here speaking to these things that ultimately they're the ones who are going to be the decision makers on. And again, I do not feel that I have not worked with Stephanie. She seems very sincere. I feel that there is no question as to her credibility, but unfortunately her boss has no credibility on these issues, has no credibility on his willingness to listen to the community, and even this morning shut down an official open city council meeting and moved it to being online after telling people who were testifying that because of your behavior, no one cares what you think. That is a quote from the Oregonian. And so he is a person who believes that he gets to decide whose opinions matter and whose don't. And he has clearly shown by his absence here and his behavior on this issue all along that he does not believe that the opinions of marginalized communities and communities actually affected by this potential decision matter to him. The opinions that matter to him are the opinions of the people who he is willing to give time to, the people who he's willing to take calls from. And I don't think any of the people in this room are those people.
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate you being here today. Next, we have Barbara. Go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you. Stephanie, I know you're on the spot, but I have one more question. You say there's some community groups that propose the shot spotter, and I'm wondering what sort of evidence they have that it would be, or have they presented evidence that it would be effective? Because tonight I've heard a ton of evidence that the shot spotter would be both ineffective and discriminatory and harmful. I've just heard evidence after evidence after evidence from different people. And so I'm wondering, do they have evidence, I mean, that it would, you know, on what basis are they saying that this would be a positive thing? Thank you.
So yeah, the FitCog is the group that put forth a recommendation. They have a written recommendation on their website, and I think that it has been linked in the chat. I'm happy to get that to you so that you can review their position on all of that.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next, we have Beatrix.
Yes.
Go ahead, Beatrix.
Yeah, I have a quick question in referring to which groups are being met. So we thank you for this opportunity to have a public forum on this. But I was wondering which other groups are you all meeting with? And this the question is directed to Stephanie.
So at a minimum, what we are doing is having a town hall that will be inclusive of the evaluation committee and as advertised as widely as we possibly can to invite anyone to attend and to, you know, provide feedback, ask questions, etc. And then, you know, there have been a multitude of meetings that the FitCog have had there. So there has been some community feedback there. There would be a council session if this proceeded to that. There would be a council session and the opportunity to also provide testimony in that forum as well. And then we also have a survey that was developed. Portland State University is administering that and developed that. And so that is also a method of outreach that we're working to try to collect additional input through an alternative source for people who can't, you know, maybe attend meetings or wouldn't feel comfortable or sharing perspectives, etc. So that's the current landscape of outreach that is envisioned in this process.
Thank you, Stephanie. So we have Sangha up next, but I just want to invite anybody who hasn't spoken yet to raise your hand, especially those who have questions who we didn't answer, or you thought about a question and you crafted it on chat. This is a good time for you to raise your hand to make sure that we address it. Thank you. Let's go to Sangha.
Okay, I'm glad, you know, they brought up today because I was on that council meeting this morning and he hung up on me because I was letting everyone know that this is the protocol. Once again, hearing the community, hearing our responses, getting our feedback, wanting to know what's going on, what I thought. But once again, when we wasn't saying what he wanted to say, he ended it. This is the response that we get from the mayor. Once again, the police commissioner and the Portland Police Bureau chief. And you mean to tell me that he's not making money hand over hand by implementing this, by taking it this far? What people mean when they say, how did we get this far, is you have no support. You're telling us, we want to know what group, their names, who decided that this was a good idea, and you acted on it. And now the community is responding, and you're still telling us we can't shut this down. Why not? Why can't we abort it? Why can't we shut this down? We're the community. Tell me again, who will make the final decisions? What are the names of the people that will make the final decision? Is it the mayor, the same person that hung up on me, the same person that's listened to the community that doesn't care? Are you telling me that we have a chance of anything with a mayor and police acting this way with impunity, and then want to add more software to watch us, to counter surveillance us, counter intel us, all of these things? And you're telling us you don't know the answer. You know very well the answer. You know that there's meetings on meetings on meetings. There shouldn't be any meetings planned on this, and the community does not want this. But there's community input that y'all want us feedback. Once again, you're telling us the same exact thing, to trust, trust, trust. You know I'm lying, but trust me. Come on, are you serious? We said Black community control. How many times? We don't need the white supremacy police to police our community, finding ways to listen to us, finding ways to target us again. And you have evidence that it does not work. And you still telling us in our face, trust you, trust the city council, trust the mayor. They're looking for, when are y'all going to wake up and give these positions to Black community people who actually are in the community? When are we going to be able to do what we need to do to give our community the resources, the funds y'all actually want to spend on this? What could Black community and brown community do with the $199 million? No one's talked about the budget. How much is this going to cost? What the money part of it, the taxpayers, what are we paying for? We're already paying for slave catchers to keep catching us.
Thank you. Senga, if you can wrap it up, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, we are already paying for all of this destruction, and you think we want to pay for more? No.
Thank you, Senga. Stephanie, any comments?
Just a few things. I want to also note that the recommendation came from members of the community as well. Again, I understand that not everybody will agree with every perspective in the room, but that recommendation did come from community members. That's what the impetus of this was. Budget is that's a question that would vary tremendously if it moved forward, depending on what type of technology was used. Again, most of this technology is charged per square mile. This pilot has been limited to no more than 4 miles. And so, there's a ballpark for people to estimate on that. And, once again, I will just acknowledge, I hear the frustration. I acknowledge that, and I will be doing everything that I can to represent what I have learned tonight to the members of City Council, who would be the ultimate decision makers if a pilot were to go forward.
Thank you, Stephanie. So we are getting close to time, and I want to appreciate everybody who's been here today. And so we have 3 people who have raised their hand. So we'll keep it to these 3 before we do our closing. Let's go to Abel.
And as you come on, Abel, let's just a reminder to keep it to 2 minutes. Teresa will go ahead and interrupt if we get too far beyond that, but we want to make sure we get these last few comments in.
Thank you.
My name is, can you hear me? This is
Yes,
Abel.
we can.
A comment and then a question. I'm 75. I've lived in the city of Portland all my life, traveled other places in the world. What I know for sure about our history is, and Frederick Douglass said this, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. I want Sangha to know that she's making my heart sing tonight. And I want to thank Celeste for making it plain, making it really plain about what we need to do. I do have a question. Now, I heard that there's some evaluation committee. I want to know, who are the members of the evaluation committee? How were they selected?
Yes, ma'am. So the members of the committee, we have a representative from PCCEP, a community representative. We have a community representative from the FitCog that made the recommendation. We have a representative from the Smart Cities group, which is the city's privacy. They're responsible for the city's privacy policy and evaluation for surveillance technology. So we have a representative from that group. We have a representative from the the Office of Equity and Human Rights. We have a representative from the Bureau of Emergency Communications, a representative from the city's IT, the Bureau of Technology Services. We have representatives from 4 of the council offices. The mayor's office is not participating in the scoring. And we have a representative from the PPB. I'm sorry, 2 representatives from PPB, one that is solely focused, a non-sworn person solely focused on data and the technical implementation piece of any technology, how it would work. And then there is, I believe, a captain from that's not a member of the FIT team or involved with the FIT team at all. And those members were put together by me and the mayor's office.
Okay, so they were selected by you and the mayor's office, meaning the mayor or someone else on the mayor's staff?
With the mayor's input, but he didn't change the proposal that I made for this panel.
Okay, I'm going to stop my video at this point. I'm having a little technical problem here, but I want to end by saying the overarching work we've got to do in this city is to advance fairness, in the administration of justice, overarching issue. That's it. Thank you, PCCEP, for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Teresa, you're breaking up. Afrida, could you jump in?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ava. We'll now go to Julie.
Hi again. I asked a few too many questions earlier, and I think one of them got lost, understandably. So I wanted to ask again, just the one. There's been a bunch of things that have come up here and some of the discussions prior to this about the legality of these various technologies in both the city of Portland and the state of Oregon. And I wanted to hear from Stephanie, has there been legal review? Do we even know of the vendors we're looking at, if any of them are like going to cause legal issues for us? Like, do we even know if any of the options we're looking at are valid in both the city and the state?
Thank you. Yes, there has been some legal review, and the RFP was designed to exclude any vendors that would violate, for example, facial recognition. I think we specifically call out nothing like that would be permitted. And I guess, and Amanda would probably join me on this. The one thing that is a little bit more nuanced is depending on the vendor, depending on the type of technology used, you know, what if it were recordings, there are there's a kind of a framework around, capturing audio recordings. And so any kind of technology that relied on that would be certainly, evaluated through that lens of, the legal framework there, but also if that were to be a technology that were selected and that were put forward, there would be strict, policy guidance around how, or the possession of the data, or how it was retained, and all of that. So it depends on which technology, but the answer to your question is yes, there has been legal review and intentional design around this to exclude technology that, is explicitly prohibited by our law, but also mindful of any kind of, safeguards that would need to be implemented if there were a technology that is not explicitly prohibited, but more nuanced. So.
Thank you, Stephanie. Amanda, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think just to give a general overview of the kind of privacy law concerns that we have, if ShotSpotter were to be collected, that is a microphone system that is running 24/7. In Oregon, our privacy law requires two-party consent to record a conversation. Those microphones can pick up conversations. It is not at all clear that ShotSpotter actually fits into any of the exceptions to those privacy laws. So our position is basically that Oregon law does not allow public microphones to record private conversations, even when they're being held in public, because we have an expectation of privacy. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. And our last commenter, Michelle.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I wanted to speak to what Gina Ronning has been saying in the chat quite a bit. And what I would like to say, so she says that we don't have enough time to do the community-based outreach to the people that are being hurt. And I'll say, like, I'm in Palhurst, Gilbert. My neighborhood has been, there's been a lot of murders here. And Hazelwood is right by me. That's the worst spot. So like we've been disproportionately hurt here. And I've worked in Guatemala. I worked in Guatemala with in a domestic violence shelter for a little while. And the thing that I learned there is that there are no quick fixes, that anything else is really cheap. And it's got to be the long haul. There are no quick fixes for this sort of thing, and trying to do anything else other than the hard work of relationship and healing and working with people, it's a pie in the sky. It's never going to happen. So to Dr. Gina Ronning, I'd say, yeah, that would be great if we had a magic wand, but ShotSpotter is not a magic wand. People have been hurt. They're acting out because they've been badly hurt. And when there's trauma, they're doing this because they don't see another way out of it, is what I see in my neighborhood. And these are people I love. And you have to either have the relationships, and I would say that's where Ted Wheeler is missing. He does not have relationships with the community. He has destroyed relationships with people he would otherwise have relationships with. And he does not have a chance of making those relationships work again because he has hurt us terribly. And as far as going forward with this, it will make things worse because they will be destroying relationships. They will be saying to my neighborhood, which is low income, and people of color, my family's, I'm white, my family isn't, like, we will be hurt by this and it will get worse. And this will be a quick fix for businesses and for people with money. And the people that don't have money, the people that have been hurt all along, will continue to get hurt, and we will continue to not have trust in the people that have hurt us all along. We need relationships. There are no quick fixes. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I want to thank everyone here for all of the comments and putting out the perspectives, the very strongly felt perspectives, in addition to all of the really excellent questions that were asked here. We know that there are more questions that were in the comments that weren't voiced out loud, but hopefully they were answered in the comments as well. If not, that folks have taken the opportunity to reach out to PCCEP to submit questions and comments as well there. We are just about at the end of our time for tonight, so we want to hand it back to PCCEP members for some very brief closing comments and next steps.
Okay, thanks, Afrida, and thanks, Teresa. And most of all, thank everybody here for your profound testimony and comments and just your time. This is what community looks like. And I'm so honored to be at PCCEP on this time, to be able to provide this space. So now PCCEP, we have some work to do. We will take your input from tonight and it'll inform our work in regards to this technology. I imagine we will move forward with a recommendation as PCCEP. We will also need to show up at City Council. So I wanted to put a couple links in the chat. The first one here is make sure you subscribe to the City Auditor's Office to get their weekly notices about City Council agenda items. We're not quite sure when this will come to City Council, so let's all keep diligence looking at it, and hopefully Stephanie will also keep us posted as PCCEP. You can come to our meetings and find out more information there. Also, again, next steps, again, to our follow-up, going to City Council, and I wanted to make sure everybody here had all the City Council's members' email addresses. You can also find those online, so make sure you're letting them know as well. And I think that was all of the things I wanted to send. And I'll move it over to Tia. I think she has some other ways for you all to get involved. But again, thank you on behalf of PCCEP for being here tonight.
Up, Tia, hold on one moment. You were on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I wanted to thank everyone for coming and let you know tonight that the Community Engagement Subcommittee is a new subcommittee, and we're so excited to have such a showing tonight, and really hope that you'll continue to come to our community meetings and events. And here's some ways to stay involved with us. Here's our email. PCCEPinfo@portlandoregon.gov, and our website, www.portland.gov PCCEP. On the website, you'll find our events and how you can send us public comments and stay involved with us. Please keep in touch with us, and we'll keep inviting you, and hopefully just keep going out with the outreach. We're also on Twitter at PCCEP Portland and on Facebook, PCCEP PDX. We really, really do hope that you'll continue to bring your voices alongside us. We really want the community engagement to bring forward to the leaders here in the city of Portland. Thank you so much for coming and being part of us tonight.
Thank you, Tia. I also want to appreciate everybody who's been here today. I want to thank our panelists, our PCCEP members of the public, and accessibility support, interpretation, and captioning for your contributions today. With that, the time is now and it's up, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the evening.
Recording stopped.
Thank you so much, everybody. Great work tonight. I appreciate all the hard work of PCCEP members. Thank you, Stephanie and Jake, for being here, Amanda and Ajay, and all of our community members. We really appreciate you so much. And our wonderful facilitators deserve so much thanks and praise. Thank you, everybody, for a very successful event, and hopefully we can make your input meaningful. We will see you next time.
Thank you.